Today, in the media conference with Lal Goel, which is brought to you by V4 News, Global TV, V4 Stream, Malnadu TV, News Gaon Se, Samvad Sarokar News, Organ Donation India Foundation and Gyan, our endeavor is to bring to you and enlighten you about the current topics. And today is a very, very important topic, which is in the interest of almost everyone, and that is the housing for all in India. But before I will go on the main topic, I would like to inform that today we are observing, the entire world is observing World AIDS Day. World AIDS Day is designated on 1st December every year since 1988, is an international day dedicated to raising awareness of the AIDS pandemic caused by the spread of HIV infection and mourning those who have died of the disease. Government and health officials, non-government organizations, and individuals around the world observe the day, often with the education on AIDS prevention and control. As of 2017, AIDS has killed between 28.9 million and 41.5 million people worldwide, and an estimated 36.7 million people are living with HIV, making it one of the most important global public health issues in recorded history. Thanks to recent improvement, access to the antiretroviral treatment in many regions of the world, the death rate from AIDS epidemic has decreased since its peak in 2005. Now, it is 1 million in 2016 compared to 1.9 million in 2005. World's AIDS Day was first conceived in August 1987 by Mr. James W. Bunn and Mr. Thomas Netter, two public information officers for the Global Program on AIDS at the World Health Organization, WHO, in Geneva, Switzerland. Mr. Bunn and Mr. Netter took their idea to Dr. Jonathan Mann, director of the Global Programs on AIDS, now known as UNAIDS. Dr. Mann liked the concept, approved it, and agreed with the recommendation that the first observance of World AIDS Day should be on 1st December 1988. We hope that by creating AIDS awareness, many lives can be saved. Now, coming to today's topic, that is housing for all in India. Housing is a question of the will. It is not rocket science. I believe that everyone has the right to safe, decent, affordable housing. By the time the nation completes 75 years of its independence in 2022, every family will have a pakka house with water connections, toilet facilities, 24/7 electricity supply access. It was May 2014 and the Modi-led government had just come to power. A year later, during the presentation of annual budget for 2015-16, the finance minister announced the intention of achieving housing for all by 2022. The idea of building 50 million housing units was floated, and finally on June 25th, 2015, the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana PMAY was launched. At the time of the launch, the PM, our Honorable PM, Mr. Modi, asserted, I quote, India was completing 75 years of independence in 2022, and by then it was our responsibility to provide a house for everyone, unquote. According to the objective of the PMAY Urban, 20 million housing units will be built during the 7-year period from 2015 to 2022. Similarly, for PMAY Grameen, that is the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Grameen, the target set was 30 million rural housing units. Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana PMAY is an initiative by Government of India in which affordable housing will be provided to the urban poor with a target of building 20 million affordable houses by 31st March 2022. It has two components, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Urban, that is PMAYU, for the urban poor, and Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana Grameen, PMAYG, and also PMAYR for the rural people. this scheme is converged with other schemes to ensure house have a toilet, Saubhagya Yojana, electricity connection, Ujjwala Yojana, LPG gas connection, access to drinking water and Jan Dhan banking facilities, etc. Total 1 crore homes are approved against total demand of 1.12 crore as of 28th December 2019. Public housing program in India started with the rehabilitation of refugees immediately after independence. Till 1960, nearly 5 lakh families were provided houses in different parts of northern India. In 1957, within the ambit of the second five-year plan of Prime Minister Nehru, Village Housing Program VHP was introduced, providing loans to individuals and cooperatives of up to rupees 5,000 per unit. Only 67,000 houses could be constructed in this scheme till end of the fifth five-year plan, 1974 to 1979. Another scheme introduced in the fourth plan called House Sites Cum Construction Assistance Scheme, HSCAS, was also transferred to the state sector from 1974 to 75. With the launch of Indira Awas Yojana, IAY, by the then Prime Minister Mr. Rajiv Gandhi in 1985, the public housing program in India got a boost. IAY was launched as a rural housing program targeting SC and ST and minority population. The program was gradually extended to cover all below poverty line BPL population. As a part of the continuous efforts of Indian government to fulfill the housing needs of rural and urban poor, Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana was launched by Prime Minister Honorable Mr. Narendra Modi in June 2015 with the aim to provide affordable housing. Under PMAY, it is proposed to build 2 crore houses for urban poor, including economical weaker section and low income groups in urban areas by the year 2022 through a financial assistance of rupees 2 trillion, that is 28 billion US dollars from central government. Under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, a subsidy of rupees 2.67 lakh is provided by the government on the interest of home loan for buying a house. The Uttar Pradesh Housing Development Council will provide houses at affordable rates under the Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana. The features of Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana are that the government will provide an interest subsidy of 6.5% for EWS and LIG, 4% for MIG1 and 3% for MIG2 on housing loans availed by the beneficiaries for a period of 20 years under credit linked subsidy schemes CLSS from the start of a loan. The houses under Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana would be constructed through a technology that is eco-friendly, while allotting ground floors in any housing scheme under PMAY, preference will be given to differently abled and older persons. The government has approved an investment of rupees 439.22 billion, that is 6.2 billion US dollars, for construction of 6,83,724 houses for urban poor, including central assistance commitment of rupees 100.50 billion, that is 1.4 billion US dollars by April 2016. The houses given under this scheme will be owned by females or jointly with males. As of 25th April 2016, the government has identified 2,508 cities and towns in 26 states for beginning construction of houses for urban poor. Construction of 1,86,777 additional houses for the benefit of urban poor with an investment of rupees 11,169 crore with central assistance of rupees 2,797 crore was approved in February 2018, taking the cumulative total houses approved to 39,25,240 houses, including PMAY scheme of the targeted 10 million houses by March 2022. And to discuss today's this important issue, we have a very elite, knowledgeable, experienced, and especially those who are related to this sector. Our panel is consisting of those guests. I would like to invite my first guest, and he is Dr. C.V. Anand Bose, IAS. Dr. C.V. Anand Bose is one-man expert commission on labor to prepare an action plan for the welfare and development of the workforce in the context of COVID-19. He was former head of disaster management, Government of India, and Central Drought Relief Commissioner, Government of India. He is also the principal advisor, Government of India Heritage Project. He is the chairman of Indian Red Cross Kerala. He was the vice chancellor of National Museum, University of Delhi. He has authored 40 books in English, Malayalam, and Hindi, including novels, short stories, and essays. 4 of his books have become bestsellers. 4 books on Vastu and architecture and 1 book on housing received prestigious the Sharjah International Book Fair Award. Dr. Bose is an housing expert, innovator, writer, orator, and visionary. The path-breaking institutions set by him, such as Nimriti Kendra Building Center, District Tourism Council, and Habitat Alliance, have been replicated at the state, national, and global level. He was the head of the prestigious Supreme Court Committee on the Treasures of Sri Padmabha Swami Temple. Dr. Bose addressed United Nations General Assembly and specialized sessions 5 times on various international issues. Dr. Bose is a recipient of Dr. Bose is a recipient of 31 national and international awards, including United Nations Global Best Practice Award. He also received prestigious Jawaharlal Nehru Fellowship. Kerala government termed him Lord of Ideas. Former Prime Minister Manmohan Singh ji called him inspired civil servant, and our Honorable Prime Minister Mr. Modi called him man of ideas. Dr. Bose has emerged as the moving spirit behind many policies announced these days. We understand that it is on his concept paper, Sabko Makan, Sasta Makan, submitted to our Honorable Prime Minister in 2014, that the Houses for All policy drawn up. Welcome, Dr. C.V. Anand Bose on our show today. Dr. C.V. Anand Bose, as mentioned in our report, that you are one of the main person who has suggested about this policy which we are going to discuss today. So basically, you are the originator of this scheme, that is Sasta Makan, Sabka Makan, or Sabko Makan, Sasta Makan, which is now a house for all in India. So we would like to know from you the housing for all in India. Dr. C.V. Anand Bose, IAS, please.
Thank you, Mr. Goel. Housing for all has become one of the flagship projects of the government of India, particularly that of the Prime Minister. Earlier, the United Nations had a similar scheme, Houses for All, by the turn of the century, but that has remained a dream. What differentiates the Prime Minister's program from the earlier global program is that it is justified by the results. If past achievements and present performance are any indicators to future potentials, I think that Houses for All Indians by 2022, that is when India celebrates the 75th anniversary of its independence, will be a realizable goal. Now, this is an issue which vexes not only India. There are more than 1 billion people, I'm sure Deepak would vouch for it, in the world who are houseless. To be sensitive to them, let us assume for a while, when we are sitting in our cozy comfort of our home, with the air conditioners on, there are more than 1 billion brothers and sisters in the world who do not have a roof over their head. And then, the enormity of the problem. More than 100,000 people in the city of Cairo sleep every day in the city's cemeteries. The abode of the dead becomes home for the living. And in Sao Paulo, more than 1 million people are in the slums. Even in the slums, get an occasion, the opportunity to sleep for the night. They have to grease the palm of the slum mafia. Children are seen fighting the dogs for a morsel. That is the stupendous problem of houselessness in the world. Now, coming back to India, you have already stated that 5 crores is the estimated shortage of houses in this country, in which 2 crores or 20 million will be provided under the Prime Minister's Awas Yojana urban and 3 crores under the Prime Minister's Awas Yojana Gramin or rural. And I understand in the first 4 years, more than 1 crore of houses were built. That is what makes the scheme practical and beautiful. Now, how do you face this issue? You see, the need of housing is there everywhere. Housing is not just a basic need. That is also a fundamental right under the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. The Constitution of India does not include it as a fundamental right, but the Supreme Court, while interpreting the right to life, has included the right to living, which includes housing as well. So it's a universal phenomenon. And it is this issue which India is trying to tackle in its own way with proven results. Therefore, we are now taking up an issue which has global importance. Now, the two differentiation between cities and rural areas, that is very, very relevant. We are on a rapidly growing stream of urbanization in the world. More than 2/3 of the people will be living in cities. Though we say we are in the global village, no, we are in the global city. Even in India, I think Vishnath, Deepak will vouch for it. More than 1/3 of the population are in cities. Even that is a whopping figure. Once, Edward Thompson, the historian, asked Gandhiji, why is it that wildlife is dwindling in the jungles? Gandhiji said, animal life is decreasing in the jungles, but animals are increasing in the cities. So in place of cities, we have monstrosities coming up. These problems are to be tackled. How do we tackle it? I don't want to dwell at length on the details of it. There are 4 issues which are core issues in this. First, land. Second, finance. Third, technology. And fourth, last but not least, are policies. I will take it up one by one. Land. We have a shortage of land. Serviced land, developed land. The KPMG, which was engaged by the Ministry of Housing and Urban Development, Government of India, they have come out with the statistics that for the implementation of this project, India needs 2 lakh hectares of developed and serviced land. Where do we get it from? And the land mafia is always against the interests of the poor. Land price is inflated. All kinds of stratagems are used to see that the land price is always hiked up. If I may take the help of the masters to describe what I'm saying, you have the Leo Tolstoy's famous story, how much land does a man need? Faham, the farmer, he's greedy for land, as all farmers are. He gets an offer. He doesn't know it's an offer made by devil. The devil tells him through another farmer, you do one thing. Start your trek at daybreak. Keep on and on walking. All the land which you have covered will be yours, free. provided you should be able to return to the point where from you started. Faham started walking. Greed takes over him. He treks and treks and treks. Suddenly remembers, unless he returns to the starting point, he will lose everything. He hastens to return to the starting point, exhausted. Once he reaches the starting point, he dies of exhaustion. He is buried in 6 feet of land. Now the question, how much land does a man need? It has already been answered. This has gripped India as well. There is land, but the land mafia has seen that land is inaccessible to the poor. The other points, finance, policy, technology. I will take that perhaps if you give me the next chance, because I do not want to deny the opportunity of others to present their views. After that, I'll certainly address the 4 key issues involved in that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bose, for giving your views, opening remark. And Dr. Bose said that it is a phenomena not only for India, but all over the world. And he mentioned that about 1 billion people, because the total world population is over 7 billion, and out of 7 billion, 1 billion people are roofless. That is a very, very sad figure, because it's not a good thing. And he has mentioned that we are sitting in an air-conditioned house, but there are so many people are sleeping in the open sky. But he says that because of this Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana, which is now delivering the goods, and he says that already about 1 crore houses have been built, and others are in pipeline. So it shows that the success story is there about this particular scheme. And he also mentioned that although this was the United Nations agenda to provide housing globally, but they failed to deliver by the end of the century. But here, this present government, who has promised in 2014-15 that they are going to start this scheme and implement it, they are, and the way it is going on, it is going to be implemented. But he also mentioned the 4 factors, although he's going to describe in details, but he said the land, the finance, the technology, and the policies which are required for a proper implementation of housing or solving the housing problem anywhere in the world. So he is going to discuss this point and explain this point in our next round. But he is very clear that under the leadership of our Honorable Prime Minister, Mr. Modi, the way this particular scheme is moving ahead, the day is not far, and he says that this is what target which has been kept of 5 crores housing will be achieved. There is no doubt about it. Thank you very much, Dr. Bose, for giving your opening remark. And I'm sure that the next round you will be giving more details to our viewers so that they will understand what you mean about these 4 main issues. Thank you very much. Now I would like to invite my next guest, and he is Mr. Deepak Vishnath. Mr. Deepak Vishnath is MTech from National Institute of Industrial Engineering, Mumbai. Mr. Vishnath was commissioned in the Indian Navy on 1st July 1980 in the engineering branch. On completion of 22 years of naval services in 2002, he started working as a training consultant to corporate houses before joining HFH India Trust at the Jimmy Carter project site Lonavala in 2006. He worked at Habitat for Humanity India Trust from 2006 till December 2016 in various capacities and roles. They are project manager at Jimmy Carter Work Project at Lonavala from 2006 to 2008, responsible for project management and M&E, Director Habitat Resource Center HRC Mumbai 2008 to 2010, Director and then Senior Director Operations and Technical Services at HFH National Office from 2010 to 2015. He was consultant to HFH India 2015 to December 2016. He is now consultant to HFH International, as well as is a consultant of TCIS to provide technical support to the India's team. Welcome, Mr. Deepak Vishnath on our show. Mr. Deepak Vishnath, you have heard what Dr. Anand Bose has mentioned. And Dr. Bose is very, very positive, and he says that the promise which has been made by our Honorable Prime Minister in 2015 is achievable. There is no doubt about it. Already 1 crore houses has been constructed, and the rest are going to be constructed in time now. And he has also mentioned that although globally it was supposed to be done by the United Nations, but they failed. But the Indian government and the present Indian government is going to deliver it in a very, very proper way with all the facilities which I have already read in my report with the LPG connection, the electricity, and the toilet, everything. So now we would like to know, because you are doing the work with one of the biggest charitable NGO. So we would like to know from you, Mr. Deepak Vishnath, the housing for all in India. Mr. Deepak Vishnath, please.
Thank you, Mr. Goel, and I also thank Dr. Bose for putting things in perspective. A good historical context from Mr. Goel, and then details from Dr. Bose. I will take on from there. First, to explain that where I come from is an international NGO. We've been working in India for almost 35 years in the housing space for the LIH and the economically weaker sections. And we work not only in providing assistance, technical assistance for construction services, but also helping with housing microfinance. So as Dr. Bose said, land, finance, policy, etc. are the 4 pillars on which housing stands. Having said that, I take a step back to define something which is called human development indicators. Now, we are all used to the HDIs, which form a part of our thinking, that per capita income, life expectancy, years of schooling gives quality of life. There are some additional indicators which have been developed and which are very pertinent to mention, and housing falls under one of these indicators. A good house with clean energy, toilet, and a firm floor improves quality of life, improves possibilities of social mobility, improves education potential of children, etc. So that is where housing comes in the human development indicator. It's an important indicator of quality of life of a citizen. Now, Dr. Bose said we are aware that 1 billion homeless in India. Presently, the figure of housing demand stands at about 6 crores.
Sorry, I think Dr. Bose has mentioned 1 billion globally.
That's correct. 1 billion globally. In India, the present demand is about 6 crores, 2 crores urban, 4 crores rural, and this is increasing. Now, let's see why it's increasing. Increasing is driven by a couple of factors. What drives demand for this increasing amount? Because by 2022, we will have to be providing for 11 crore housing units. What is driving demand? Demand is being driven by, one, social mobility. It's been driven by rapid urbanization. By 2050, 50% of India is going to be in cities. It is driven by migration to cities because urban centers are becoming economic engines. It is driven by rising incomes. So a vision to tackle this kind of housing demand is what the government has been working on. With the convergence of many schemes, because it's not just housing alone which delivers. We have Swachh Bharat, we have smart cities with infrastructure development, and the Atal Rural Renewal Mission, etc. With the convergence of all these schemes, the vision of the government is to be able to tackle this kind of demand places. So we are looking at supply being established in urban areas. We are looking at supply being organized in peri-urban areas and also in rural areas. I have a few points listed down as to what could be a strategic plan which the government is following and which could be given greater impetus. Now, what are the challenges facing providing this housing? The first challenge is on housing program delivery. I feel under the Housing and Urban Affairs Ministry or the Rural Development Ministry, which are doing the PMAY urban and rural, we need to create some kind of a program monitoring, program management entity, a nodal agency which looks at housing, The government provides it an infrastructure status. The sector gets an infrastructure status so that it draws in various other, things like finance, etc. We also need this nodal agency to concentrate on new technologies, new building materials, better construction services so that we can target housing for all. The second thing, from the consumer's point of view, what should be done for the actual people who are needing the supply? From the consumers, access and availability for the EWS and LIH, because 70% of the demand in urban areas is from EWS and LIH. So we need an urban policy for EWS and LIH housing in urban areas. We need access for affordable finance, better building materials and technology for LIH, EWS. We need to look at the taxes and the fees which are charged in the affordable housing space so that, KPMG tells us about 30 to 35% of the cost of a house is taxes and fees. So this could be rationalized. We could look at lower loan rates, which is being done through the CLSS, but we could revisit this. Point number two, which Dr. Bose is also going to reflect on, is the legal and regulatory framework which constitutes housing for all, which provides housing for all. Cities have to relook at their development plans. What land areas need to be converted? How better land use is to be done? Can we develop satellite townships so that crowded city centers are, decongested? Do we need to look at the Rent Control Act again? Because 50% of the housing demand or the housing market in cities is not ownership based; it is rental. So bridging the gap between supply and demand for rental housing, land acquisition, of course, revisiting LARR, which was done by this government, but I think a little more work needs to be done in this regard, especially if housing becomes an infrastructure sector. Look at FAR, FSI rules. Can we rationalize them? Also, some amount of decentralized workings of the ULBs so that they are empowered to provide housing. Next point is the PPP model, where we encourage private companies to participate in the housing market, providing finance, drawing in FDI, institutional investments, etc. Development of infrastructure, services, and utilities, site and services kind of projects, so that not only housing, but the infrastructure around it comes up. Having said all this, I would like to talk basically on one aspect, which is rental housing. The present schemes of PMAY are largely ownership based. What escapes notice now is, which came up to the fore in COVID, was the large reverse migration took place because people were staying in rental housing and having no money, were not able to pay the house rents. Can rental housing supply and demand be looked at? Can this market be developed? Can slums be allowed to upgrade their basic services so that rental housing can come up there? Can the government look more at dormitory type, visible housing? Because presently rental housing is largely invisible, it is informal, it is very diverse in the sense that rental housing could be just a bed, it could be a floor, it could be a flat, it could be a house itself. So rental housing is very diverse. So bringing rental housing to the forefront in urban areas, I think has to be tackled on a war footing, on a mission. I will close with this, with due regard to time. I will take up questions if you have any subsequent. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Deepak. And Mr. Deepak says that what the government is doing is a good thing. The only thing is that there are few things which they have to look at. That the first thing he says, there should be a regulatory body for this particular scheme. This scheme should be designated as a infrastructure scheme, so then all the other things like finance, etc., will be easy for to implement this scheme. And secondly, he says about the taxes, because he says according to KPMG, the about 35% taxes are there on this housing sector. So if those can be rationalized. And he says that if the main thing which is happening now is that in the urban area, because of the reverse migration now due to the COVID, now the rental thing is a big thing, because according to Mr. Deepak, 50% of the demand of housing in a urban area is of rental. So the government should look in this matter also, that whether we should provide for the ownership or we should go for the rental also. And he has given all his points in a very systematic way, which I'm sure our viewers have been enlightened with those points, which now in the next round again he is going to give more details of what he means, how it can be done as far as the rental is concerned, whether he wants that the government should play as a build up their own house and give on rent, or they will allow somebody to take the loan and allow them to give the on rent. Because the earlier experience of a slum development in Mumbai was that when the houses were built up there, uh, the houses instead of jhuggi jhopdi, they have constructed the house for those persons who were staying in the jhuggi jhopdi. Ultimately, the mafia has taken over those buildings, and again the jhuggi jhopdi fellow has gone to another jhuggi jhopdi in other more remote area of Mumbai. So the scheme should be which has to be very, very clearly defined. I'm sure Mr. Deepak will enlighten us about that, how government can play a major role as far as the rental is concerned, as well as even the housing, how they will ensure that the mafia will not take over this scheme, and they will try to give, because after all this scheme is for the poorest people, the poor who cannot afford the big houses, because the government is also subsidizing. But it should not happen that the rich people will take over or the mafia will take over, and the end result will be that the poor will not get anything. That we will see in the next round. We will definitely ask Mr. Deepak, and I think he is going to explain that also. Thank you very much, Mr. Deepak, for giving your such enlightening views. Now I would like to invite my next guest, and she is Miss Taru Behel. Ms. Taru Behel is the communication specialist with United Nations and leading journalist at Gurugram. She is having over 30 years experience in writing, editing, conceptualizing innovative formats, and ideating with teams engaged in media, social sector, and corporate CSR. She is working in the development sector of international communication specialist, WHO Maldives, made from May 2020 onwards by providing communication and documentation support to WHO Maldives. She completed a book on COVID-19 response for Southeast Asia in 2020. She contributed to a special publication on public health crisis in Myanmar. She wrote 2 sections and edited a book on risk profile for disaster and disease routes for resilience, a health emergency risk profile, and did a paper for a WHO research journal. She is also on panel of editors for WHO India country office. She documented India story with respect to the international health regulations for WHO's India country office. She was the consultant for knowledge management UNICEF from 2013 to 2015. She is an independent media strategist. Currently, she is contributing to leading national publications like Times of India, Hindu, Business Line, Hindustan Times, and Better India Portal. She was the media advisor to Ministry of Tourism in 2018 to 2019. She was assistant editor with Singapore-based Luxury World Travel magazine. She provided content to travel portal of hindustantimes.com. She wrote popular columns of Life Ties for Tribune for 10 years. She wrote monthly columns in Business Standard on life issues on health for the Week magazines. She was the national editor of online Mint Hindustan Times Media from March 2007 to January 2009. She was the assistant editor and features editor of The Statesman. She published more than 3,000 articles since 1987 in Business Line, Times of India, Hindustan Times, Statesman, The Telegraph, Pioneer, Hindu, Femina, and The Tribune. She is independent woman director on the board of Jamna Auto Industries. She was invited by Population Reference Bureau in Washington to cover Women Deliver Conference in Washington in 2010, 2011, and 2012. She was awarded 2 years fellowship by PRB USAID funded Women's Edition. She, as a journalist from Southeast Asia, visited HIV projects in Thailand organized by WHO. Welcome, Ms. Taru, on our show. Ms. Taru, you have already heard Dr. C.V. Anand Bose. You have already heard Mr. Deepak, and both have given the details about the housing in India. But before that, I would like to congratulate you because you have worked with this HIV people, and you will be covering this HIV projects in Thailand organized by WHO, and today is the World AIDS Day. So I must congratulate you that you are doing such a good social work service. Definitely your social service in the housing sector will also give dividend. Now, we would like to know from you the housing for all in India. Ms. Taru Bhel, please. Please unmute. Please unmute, Ms. Taru. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Goel. It's been a pleasure and honor to be on this panel and to hear Dr. Bose and Mr. Deepak share their views. At the outset, I'd like to say that I'm not a housing and infrastructure expert, but yes, my experience of working at the grassroots and with the agencies that I represent has allowed me to engage with a lot of disadvantaged communities. And that has given me a perspective and insight into just how much a house and a living abode means to everybody under the sun. I mean, any living species, whether rich or poor, in developed country or an underdeveloped country, a home means so much. And research has shown that people with a roof over their head and in safe and secure environments, they end up doing much better, they're more productive, crime rate is low, and all the facets of human development, which the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, also talk about, are linked with housing. A home anchors us, and it's not just for nothing that it is said that the home is where the heart is. And I have seen communities, whether it is, I mean, as I heard Mr. Deepak and Mr. Bose say, that the government has earmarked all the necessary funding for housing. And there are plans. Housing for all is a very lofty, attainable goal, provided we keep in mind the how-to factor. What needs to be done, we know. The finances are there, we know. The budgets are there, we know. But how much are we keeping in mind the fact of the local communities in need? So I feel that a lot of participatory approaches with communities have to be taken into account before constructing any kind of housing abodes. Now, I've seen communities around the coastal line, whether it is Orissa, where there are cyclones, or tsunami in the south. When houses got destroyed and the government and NGOs and the civil society stepped in to build housing, the local communities' needs were probably not factored in. And they were given houses which were away from the coastal line. They were better tiled, more facilities, more amenities. But the communities went back to those vulnerable areas and risked themselves and put themselves at risk again because their intrinsic needs were not taken into account. Similarly, earthquakes in Gujarat or the displaced communities of the Rohingyas in Bangladesh. It's very important to consider the socio-economic conditions, their cultural sensitivities before going in for any kind of reconstruction or rehabilitation. So to that extent, I feel it is the participatory public-private partnerships and participatory approaches that need to be considered, keeping in mind local resources, local raw materials, traditional housing materials to be kept in mind while building their homes. In Assam, where the floods had inundated houses around those areas, and every year the floods would, impact those communities, it was seen that the modern housing projects did not really work. It needed NGOs to come in who understood those communities, who worked with them closely and built those houses on stilts that were actually useful. So I think those are the things that need to be kept in mind. We know what needs to be done, but how it is done is what is critical. I think I leave it at that for now and let the panel deliberate on that aspect while taking into account large projects which can be more inclusive and for the larger common good. And as you said about HIV, I've also worked with sex workers and transgenders, and all of them have wanted to have their own communities which are safe, secure, and where there's less discrimination. So we must work closely with the communities whom we want to target while building their homes, rather than just sit in air-conditioned offices and have fancy plans. The committees for each of these target groups should be very carefully worked out, keeping their needs in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Taru, for giving your frank opinion about this housing for all in India. And Ms. Taru says that, yes, it is a very good project, no doubt about it, but we have to keep the local needs, the community needs in mind. And she mentioned that how the coastal areas of Odisha or the tsunami area of south, where those housing projects have come up, which were away from the coastal area, but the fishermen and all those communities who are staying near to the coastal area have gone back to the coastal area again, although it's a very risky area, but they have, because they are depending, their living is depending on that. So when you are constructing a house, you must see the social economic conditions of that particular community. You must understand what is the need, and the construction has to be done in such a way, like she has given example of the place Assam, where the floods are very, very much always, every year. And she says that the houses which are constructed of no use because they could not, they are not on slit, and which the NGOs are now doing. So she is very particular about those who are really the communities, those who are in that particular field, whether they are sex workers or HIV positive. They want to stay in a safe environment in their own community. So whenever we are going for a housing project for any community, we must take consideration of their needs and requirement. Thank you very much, Ms. Taru. And Ms. Taru is expecting that what things which she has raised will be addressed by our other panelists. Thank you very much, Ms. Taru, for giving your views. Now I would like to go to Dr. Bose. Dr. Bose, you have already heard what Mr. Deepak has mentioned, as well as Ms. Taru has mentioned. Now, my question to you is, in the context of government's commitment for providing houses for all by 2022, can you give your overview in the housing situation in the world and in India? Dr. Bose, please.
Thank you.
And,
First of all,
one more thing, Dr. Bose, sorry. You have to explain about those four fundamental things which you have last time in the opening remark, you said that you will be explaining now.
Thank you, Goel sir. I started with four fundamentals, but after listening to Tharu, I know there is a fifth fundamental, which is much more important. That is the Tharu effect. You know, it's easy to build a house. That's a mechanical process. But how to convert a house into a home, that is a much more important process. I now remember a report on India's soft power, that is art and culture, the architect of which is Dr. Vinduja Menon, the great danseuse and film actress. She has given a lot of ideas how to turn a house into a home through the application of art and culture. And that's an area which has been left out. In the COVID days, when we are all in lockdown, what took care of India's mental health are the singers, the musicians, the dancers, the writers. See, they kept us company and saved us from the rigors and the depression which lockdown would otherwise cause. So I think there are more and more areas which need to be addressed. Recommendations are contained in the report on India's soft power, which Dr. Vinduja Menon has drawn up, which I will certainly give to others also, including Taru. Now to the other aspects, the more mundane aspects of housing. Finance. For the poor man, cost of finance is equally important as the availability. For the rich, availability is the only thing that matters. Cost of credit is not important. We need a lending policy in the housing sector, which encourages the poor man to get loans. Now, I remember how the banks behave. For instance, the Mudra scheme. The Prime Minister has declared that easy loan should be given to the entrepreneurs. But the entire banking fraternity is not sold on that. They create problems. We say lending should not be based on security. It should be need-based lending. But that is not what is happening. I was a banker before I got in the IAS. Dr. Talwar, who was the chairman of the State Bank of India, he exhorted the probationers, you should do banking on a war footing. Advance, that is, giving loan is also called advance in the banking parlance. He said we should advance on a war footing. And I stood up and said, sir, the problem with banking is that we advance on a war footing because we advance, they retreat. Therefore, banking is always based on security. That has been lifted by this government. Of course, the beginning was done earlier also. But now this interest subvention scheme upfront is a major source of inspiration for the poor people to avail of bank loan and construct houses. Now again, if I may come to the lighter side of that, I remember a person who came to the Calcutta main branch of the State Bank of India. He said he wants 10,000 rupees loan, 10,000, because he wants to go to Kerala, God's own country, for 3 weeks. The bank manager asked him, okay, it's a small amount, but what security can you give? He said, my car is there. It is a Rolls-Royce car. They inspected it, checked the papers, and took the car and kept it in the garage under tight security and lent him 10,000 rupees. After 3 weeks, he returns and gives the 10,000 rupees plus interest, some 200 rupees or so for 3 weeks. The bankers were curious. They asked him, you own a Rolls Royce, you are so rich. Then why do you want to borrow a paltry sum as 10,000 rupees? And he said, that is my business sense. In this city, where will I get a safe parking place for my car? If I take 10,000 rupees from you, you will park it in your own garage under tight security. This is an exception. Normally, bankers are still following the old doctrine of security-based lending. So that is what has been sought to be eased by the Prime Minister's Awas Yojana. Now, the question, your Deepak Vishwanath quoted KPMG. KPMG was engaged by the government of India. According to KPMG, he said 6 crores is the shortage which they estimated, rising to 11 crores. Yes, that statistics is what KPMG has given. KPMG has also pointed out that for the achievement of the goal of houses for all by 2022, they said 120 crores or 20 lakh crores of rupees required. Do you think our banks will be able to give this? But there is a silver lining here. In India, so far, government's investment in housing has never been more than 6%. Normally, it hovers around 3 to 6%. The rest comes from the private sector. What the private sector needs are policies which would enable easy fund flow from the banking system. That to a very large extent has been achieved in this. And the third is policies, which now Deepak has also stated. We have many policy innovations by the government, which in land. See, the restrictive clauses in land acquisition has been lifted and it has been made practical. Service land and developed land is now become increasingly available. With the government coming down on black money, the mafia system in land deal has also been contained to a very large extent. Now the policies, we have projects like Amrit, which he said, that is Atal Mission for Rejuvenation Transformation. Amrit scheme is there. There are the smart city schemes. There are various umpteen schemes which government has launched, which should be read in conjunction with the Prime Minister's Awas Yojana. Policies, enabling policies. Now the thinking is that in the housing sector, government should remain a facilitator than a provider. Government need to provide houses directly. They can be a facilitator. What does that mean? That only means create enabling environment for the housing sector to bloom by appropriate policies and even legislation. Not only that, these policies and legislation are to be implemented effectively. That is where India has been found to be lagging, because we are a soft state. All rules and regulations are there, but implementation is tardy. Recently, we have had the instance of flats being constructed in Kerala in violation of all the building rules. The Supreme Court
I think we lost
enforcement of legislation. Now to the technology aspect. I think there are umpteen technology available in this country. In areas as widely different as atomic energy and agriculture. India of course, it had its ill effects, which I'm not coming to now. Similarly, in housing, we have plethora of technologies developed by the various R&D institutions in the country. The Central Building Research Institute, Roorkee, the Structural Engineering Research Center, Chennai, the various regional research laboratories under the CSIR, and of course the IITs. Now, cost-effective and environment technology has been identified for all the geoclimatic regions of India. It is available with the Building Material Technology Promotion Council. Therefore, we have a great technology base which propagates cost-effective and environment-friendly technology, safe technology in housing. But the only thing is, these technology dissemination, generation of technology is there. Dissemination of technology is important. Who will take the technology from lab to lab? Technologies are developed and kept in the laboratory shelves. It is like the modern ladies buying ornament. They don't wear it. They keep it in the locker. Technology is there, developed and kept it in the locker. One conference or a seminar will be held. That does not lead to dissemination of appropriate technology, affordable technology. Yes, affordable technology. One swallow does not make a summer. What we need, as far as technology dissemination housing is required, is a change from tokenism to total coverage. This Prime Minister's Awas Yojana also envisages that. I think what are the technologies? I do not want to go into the details of this. If there is another occasion for me, I will certainly state for the information of the ordinary people who watch this. What are the technologies available which can ensure them a roof over their head without much pains? I'll come to that later if there is a chance. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bose. Now I would like to go to Mr. Deepak. I would like to ask a question to Mr. Deepak. Although, Mr. Deepak, you might have heard what Dr. Bose has mentioned, and he has given the details of all the fourth, rather now he has mentioned the fifth pillar also of the housing. But my question to you, you are representing one of the NGO major in the world in the field of housing. According to you, what are the major challenges in the housing in India and what are the solutions? Because challenges, you have explained few, you might be explaining more, but what are the solutions which we are looking for, and how this can be solved so that the housing for all will be really achievable, which although Dr. Bose says it's achievable, but not only achievable, but it should be given to everyone, and it should be practical, like what Ms. Taru has raised the reservation. Mr. Deepak, please unmute yourself.
Yeah, so to answer each one separately, in the historical context, the learning we are at present is In earlier days, the houses were made by contractors. So what Taru says is true, that the contractors were, commissioned to go and construct houses for the poor. It did not work because what came out of that was simply terrible barracks, which were neither geoclimatically good, did not use local materials or local skills, and people did not use them. So a major shift which has occurred is what is called beneficiary-led construction. Today's PMAY rural and one facet of PMAY urban empowers through funds and technical assistance a beneficiary to build their own house, which means they can incorporate all functional, cultural, economic requirements. Some people pursue livelihoods in their living spaces. Ladies might like to be doing some sewing. There may be a carpet weaver who needs a weaving device inside the house. There may be livestock. So all these things have been tackled to a great extent by what is called the beneficiary-led construction. Point one. What are the challenges actually facing India? There is a set of challenges which rural folk face. There's a set of challenges which urban folk face, at least as far as ownership housing is concerned. Now we are fixed on ownership and not rental. In rural areas, SC communities still have land tenure issues. If you go to Marathwada, each village, which is called the revenue village, will have a small pada where the SC or ST community would reside with actually no land. They would not have formal or de jure land tenures. So getting them at least de facto land tenures to build homesteads would go a long way in solving the rural housing problem. Point number two, the second challenge is availability of affordable finance. This too, since NABARD, NHB, RBI have been working on what is called the microfinance networks. Microfinance initially came up through the setting of self-help groups, getting them to improve their credit ratings, linkages to banks, etc., for livelihood and what are called consumption loans. My organization, Habitat, went into a 3-year research to see whether housing microfinance was the need. Because as you will know, that low-income groups, as Dr. Bose also mentioned, do not have either tenure to give to the bank for security or any other asset or collateral to take a loan from. They are the non-bankable but economically active poor. To that section, a housing microfinance loan makes absolute sense because they would be part of SHGs. The SHGs would give what is called the social security for one of their members to take this loan, and they would stand by when this loan was repaid and used for housing. We developed one of the first housing microfinance companies called Microbuild, which does wholesale lending to partner organizations who have been institutionally capacitated to on-lend to the poor families for housing. The purpose of the loan is not livelihood or income generation, but it is for developing an asset. And it is not only ownership based, these housing loans are available for home improvements. They are available for incremental addition to housing. Here I will come to another point saying that ownership is one subsector of housing for all. Incremental building, that is adding a room, adding a toilet, adding a improved kitchen or a smokeless chula, are part of a family's continuous pursuit to better housing. So here I would like to say that housing, as we see it, is not a noun, it is a verb. It is a continuous work in progress for a family. As the family grows, they continue improving their housing stock. So having said that, I touched the second point, that is finance and the kind of housing construction activity which is actually taking place in rural areas. It is incremental, it is home improvements, it is progressive and continuously in process. In urban areas, challenges are, of course, land availability, and these can be tackled by regulatory framework, as I said, by city development plans, development of satellite townships, and development of rental housing stock. You mentioned, the schemes like the SRA in Mumbai, the Slum Clearance Board in Chennai have not been successful, but because, corruption has overtaken these schemes, etc. So more decentralized power to the ULBs, to the city councils to make sure regulatory frameworks exist. Rental housing is developed, rental housing is visible, it is little more formal than what it is, and there is community participation. As Taru mentioned, community participation in all this is important, because if there is ownership by the community, there is chances of success in the project. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deepak, for giving your views and clarifying few doubts. Now I would like to go to Ms. Taru. Ms. Taru, you have heard Mr. Deepak, and what he said is that it is not the scheme where they are just giving to the contractor and building it. Now, in this new scheme of the Pradhan Mantri Awas Vikas Yojana, it is very clear that they are giving the loan to the beneficiary directly, and then the beneficiary can do it as per their need. So your reservation, which you have raised earlier, I think it can be sorted out by this. Now, my question to you is, as a leading journalist and a social activist, what do you think are the contribution which governmental sector, we are not talking now about government, I am asking you because you are working with lots of NGOs and you are doing yourself so much work, which non-governmental sector can make in the field of housing, especially about the marginalized communities?
I think there's a lot that can be done. I mean, as I said, that, if there are committees that are formed and you bring in some responsible activists on board, you'll be able to identify need of the hour and also have practical solutions. Like, for example, I have actually worked with community in Rajasthan, which is actually not on the census. They have no pehchan patra, they have no identity card, so they're not on the radar of any political organization. These are the people who are totally in the hands of manipulative parties of stone quarrying and mining. And when you visit them, you realize that every possible exploitation that can be done is done with them, whether it is rape, whether it is debt, whether it is suicide, early deaths, disease, name it. But they are not on the radar of any political party or any agency, because they are working in such isolation. Similarly, I've seen communities around the Hindon River, where in Uttar Pradesh, that water, because of industrial effluents, there's contamination, there's arsenic in the groundwater. And I've seen communities where, again, nobody wants to touch them. No doctors, no health facility, no government. People are dying, people have skin diseases, but they will not leave the place they are staying because they're so attached to that place. And of course, they don't have money. So I feel that a lot of these communities can be addressed. There should be better linkages with government agencies. A lot of these schemes they're not aware of. So a lot of advocacy also needs to be done. So apart from, they must know what are their rights. They must know how they can access them, because they're poor, they're uneducated. So it has to be a holistic whole of society and a whole of government approach, where NGOs can play a very critical role by highlighting those areas of concern and ensuring that, those issues are taken up in the parliament. There are parliament questions, journalists write about it, create advocacy, get international journalists to write. And somewhere these numbers should matter, even if they are small and in minority, because only then can we say that indeed, housing for all is a reality, at least that we're aspiring towards. So, I mean, I think everybody needs to come together. The government is doing a good job. There are policies and there are agencies that are ready to pitch in, but somebody needs to knit them all together, weave it, and, create pockets of excellence. Similarly, I think there are lessons to be learned from overseas, like the kibbutz model in Israel, even in Japan now, in India also, you've had the WeWork model for working that has worked. Similarly, WeLive model in Japan is working, where younger people are getting together or the elderly are getting together with support from the government, the private sector, and the social sector. So I think all these models need to be studied, and there is an endless scope, so much to be done.
Okay, thank you very much, Ms. Taru. There is an endless scope, so much to be done, according to Ms. Taru. Now, Dr. Bose, you have heard both of them again, Mr. Deepak as well as Ms. Taru, and both are of this opinion that all this scheme is very good, it's implementable, but it requires a human face, it requires the knitting that everyone should be joining. Dr. Bose, you are there. What do you think are the major issues to be tackled in the housing sector, Dr. Bose?
Yeah. In fact, both Tharu and Deepak has given me new ideas to build upon. Tharu has spoken about the various models that are available in Japan and Israel. That triggered a thought in me, something which is unexpected in a discussion like this. As a housing enthusiast or whatever you can call me, not expert in any case, housing observer, I find one very good model is a Libyan model introduced by Colonel Gaddafi. Of course, Gaddafi has been finished off due to political reasons. I'm not getting into that. But there is a saying, give the devil his due. If that is applied, the Gaddafi model in housing is an excellent model. So when he came to power, after deposing Idris, he nationalized the oil industry, and his priority was to use the proceeds for housing, healthcare, education, and infrastructure. You'll be surprised to know that the country, which had hardly less than a single-digit literacy figure, rose up to 85.6% in literacy, and housing for all became almost a reality. So if where there is a will, there is a way. I cannot compare India with Libya or Narendra Modi with Gaddafi. But where housing is given priority, there are many models which, as Tharu has pointed out, in Japan, in Israel, and even in an unexpected place called Libya. What he said is a very fundamental change which has taken place in the housing sector in India. Earlier, housing was an artisanal activity. Now that has become a contractor activity. There is a lot of difference in this. The exploitative contracting system is one that hampered the growth and development of housing in the country. Do you know at one stage, India had a surplus of housing. It is from there that we have come to this level. And then the building materials. Yes, he highlighted the rental housing. That also I'll take up, since it's a specific point which has come from him. And for the information of the viewers and of course, Deepak ji, in the third announcement made by Nirmala Sitharaman ji on that is the third package, stimulus package, housing, the restrictive practices which prevail in the housing sector, which impeded the growth of rental housing, has been taken away. The government has decided, under the Prime Minister's Awas Yojana itself, a third dimension is there, that is affordable rental apartment complex. That is basically meant for the migrant workers, an area in which you and I have been working together. Now, a segment of this is that there will be affordable rental houses all over the country, mainly to cater to the requirements of the migrant workers, and it applies to others also. Rental housing is something where India is giving importance to. And now, if this problem is to be tackled, India cannot give, India need not also, luxury houses to everybody. What the Prime Minister is committed on is to provide affordable houses. How this affordability is reached? You see, earlier, as Deepak pointed out, we had a system, a tradition of construction practices, which is rooted in the use of locally available building materials. That was our style. That was the house becomes sustainable. Not only financial sustainability, social sustainability, there should also be cultural sustainability. Our culture was to build houses using locally available materials through the local artisans. Now we turned to the Western construction styles, concrete houses. Why do we need concrete at all for small houses, even big houses? See, those students of housing will know, or architecture will know, All the great temples, the forts, the castles, they were all built centuries ago. There was no concrete. Concrete was not even known at that time. Even Buckingham Palace has not used concrete. Now the Western construction style, the exploitative contracting system has taught us you can have a two-storied house only if you use 4-inch thick RCC. Now there are alternatives India has discovered. The funicular shell, 1-inch thick. 1-inch thick concrete, because the funicular shape can give the same strength which a 4-inch thick RCC can give. We have the precast plate floors, another technology. We have the filler slab technology. When your roof becomes, less weighty, less heavy, the walls also similarly will become, the cost can be reduced in the roof, in the walling materials, and also for doors and windows. There is a wonder material called ferro cement. Ferro cement is nothing but cement and steel in lean ratio, which can be used as a timber substitute. No need to fell forest in the name of housing. Therefore, we bring a judicious blend of technology and tradition and getting back to the Indian system of building houses. I think much of the problems can be solved. Now we feel West is the best, for we use energy-intensive materials, cement and steel. The most energy-intensive materials are used. And what is happening in the microclimate of the house? Lead is used, paint is used. These destroy the microclimate. We are toxifying our children in the name of fashion. You borrow from money from outside. You sell your ornaments. You pester your in-laws. You collect all the money and build a big house. Who is there to live in? Hardly the husband and wife. A big building house, which becomes a symbol of your respectability and stature in society. Then what do you do? All big windows in teak. All these windows will be closed. Curtains will be put so that light doesn't come. Then you put your air conditioner. And finally, you have to sell the house to repay the loan. So the culture of housing has changed. We have to go to the basics, go to the roots. India has a Vastu Vidya system, which is rooted in nature. Our concept of house is not an escape from nature. Housing is an escape into nature. That concept has been exploded by the West. Therefore, we should have a thorough cultural looking back. As Tharu said, as Deepika substantiated, we should have cultural sustainability in our concept of housing. So housing is not just a brick and mortar exercise. Housing is a cultural exercise. If we have an integrated view of housing, I am sure that India has got all the wherewithal to provide houses for all. Don't forget, this was one country where we had surplus houses, and we have to come back to that. I see this Prime Minister's Awas Yojana and their commitment for houses for all by 2020 only as a beginning of a total change in India in the cultural field. Yes, this is going to be a game changer forever. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Bose. And Dr. Bose is very positive that this is going to be a game changer, this Pradhan Mantri Awas Vikas Yojana, which is going to provide the low-costing housing to the rural as well as urban area. And he is giving all the details, which our viewers might have already heard, and they are already enlightened. But now my thing is I'm asking Mr. Deepak, you have, Mr. Deepak, your suggestions to the government, if any, and advice to public. Mr. Deepak, please.
Yeah, largely I would go along the lines of community participation is very important in improving housing stock, one. As far as possible, local materials, local labor to construct housing where it is beneficiary led, so that vernacular architecture and locally available material can reduce the greenhouse gas emissions of construction. Point number 3, I would like also to bring to the front that we have been developing various standards for validating green housing. Looking at these standards, there should be construction literacy generated among the common public to understand what is embodied energy of a house. How does an RCC structure actually affect the environment? Where does your source material, natural material which are being mined, like lime, like sand, like earth for making blocks, what it is doing at the back end from where the mining is taking place, so that we can be more, sustainable in our choices. So I would say that affordable housing by 2022 in a sustainable, inclusive manner is the ecosystem we have to be targeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Deepak. Now, Ms. Taru, what are your suggestions to the government and advice to public?
I think COVID-19 has been a great leveler, and it has also shown us that the lure and appeal of cities world over is diminishing. So that's an opportunity which the government and housing societies and the housing board should take advantage of, and look at peri-urban areas and rural areas to develop and create the infrastructure around them so that it can be attractive for city dwellers. Like in the US, you have university cities. So there is a university, and around it the entire city functions. So similarly, a complete ecosystem should be created. And I think while we are doing this, we should keep the gender aspect in mind, make sure that the woman's rights, the name on her, the title deed, and a lot of advocacy is created around home ownership and rights and titles and deeds. So, and look at some of the good pilot projects that have done well and have not been able to go to scale because of lack of funding. That's where government comes in. So look at those pilot projects across the country. And I'm sure Deepak is the right person to advise there. He would be in the know of which state has unique issues and what is culturally and socially and locally relevant there, and take those projects to scale. A more open approach by the government and a more participatory, intersectoral, multi-sectoral approach should work.
Thank you very much, Ms. Taru. Although about the women rights, what you have mentioned, I think in this Pradhan Mantri Awas Vikas Yojana, this is very clearly mentioned that the house will be in the name of the women only, and in case if it's a joint name, then the husband will be the jointly this thing, but woman name will be the first name. Thank you very much for giving your views. Now, I would like to ask Dr. Bose. Dr. Bose, you have been the pioneer of the low-cost housing sector in India through the Nimriti Kendra, for which the United Nations has selected a global best practice in the field. How can we make housing cost-effective and environmental friendly? Although you have explained, but can you give some more details because you are the pioneer in this field? Dr. Bose, please.
See, as Deepak has mentioned, we should go back to the traditional construction practices using locally available materials. I think if that is done, India can achieve housing self-sufficiency. Now, as you proudly say, roti, kapda, and makan, India is one country or a subcontinent which has achieved sufficiency or food security. Food security is there. Now it is housing security. I think India may be the first country in Asia to reach the level of housing security. We have technologies available with us, and we have great Vastuvidya tradition which is available with us. If we stop sedulous aping of the West, I am sure if we find our inner strength in the housing sector, India can not only be self-sufficient, India can be the provider for houses to the other countries as well. Now, we are request all of us to give advice to the public. Lord Masefield said, advice is seldom welcome, and those who need it the most like it the least. I think that applies to government. To end on a lighter vein, we had a headmaster who advises everybody. One day he saw a young man leaning against a two-story building and smoking. The headmaster wanted to advise him. How many cigarettes do you smoke? 3-4 packets a day. Since when did you start smoking? Since the day I could hold a cigarette between my fingers. The headmaster calculated and said, with this amount, you could have purchased this building. The youth asked him, sir, do you smoke? No. Have you purchased this building? No. Then last week, I purchased this building. So advice is seldom welcome. Those who need it the most, like it the least, and government is the agency which needs advice more. And what I said follows. Anyway, let's all hold hands together and have not only houses for all, but homes for all. The love, compassion, understanding will be there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So not only the houses, but the homes for all, says Dr. Anand Bose. Thank you very much, all of you. So today you have seen how the housing for all in India is going to be a reality. There are lots of apprehension initially. Everybody was talking whether this government has announced this very mega project, whether they are going to achieve it or not. But now the time has come, although the COVID was there for last 8-9 months, but still the way the government policies are moving, the day is not far that housing for all will be there, a reality in India. And this is a very, very big achievement for it's not only for the government, for everyone in the field, every household or every citizen of the country. Thank you very much. And today's program, which has been live telecasted by V4 News, Global TV, V4 Stream, Malnadu TV, News Gaon Se, Samvad Sarokar News, as well as it was shown live on Facebook and YouTube. And our endeavor is to bring to you every day something which is a current topic or where it is connected with the public interest. And tomorrow, media conference with Lal Goel, the topic is role of youth in globalization. And our chief guest tomorrow is Mr. Bhupati Prasad Pandey, IAS, former Additional Chief Secretary, Government of Maharashtra, along with 8 youth guests from different parts of India who are going to be participating, going to raise their points, and Mr. Pandey will be giving the answers and will be saying how the role of youth in globalization. So please do join tomorrow media conference with Lal Goel at 10:30 a.m. Thank you very much, Dr. C.V. Anand Bose. Thank you very much, Mr. Deepak. And thank you very much, Ms. Taru, for joining and enlightening all of us. And thank you all the viewers for watching our show.